3, 2, 1.
Good morning, Morai V'Rabotai, Bruchim Abayim. We are continuing on Masechet Makkot, and we are on Daf Tet Zayin, Amud Bet, 12 lines up from the bottom of the Amud by 2 dots. Amar Rav. Today's Amud is being learned. The Zchut Refuah Shelema of Rachel Simcha Bat Nahid. They should have full recovery. Refuah Shelema Be'ezrat Hashem. Amen. This month's learning of the community has been dedicated by the Kohen family, by Shea family, and by Dayan families. Should be an ultimate zchut for all of their families. Be'ezrat Hashem. Amen. So we are continuing on the examples of the Mishnah of who gets Malkut, and the example Mishnah gave was Achal Tevel Umaser Rishon. If a person eats produce that has not been fixed by taking all of the matnot kuhuna and leviyah from it, you get malkut. So we started this yesterday, last shiur. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav, Achal Tevel Shel Maser Ani Loke. Now we will see that most of the masrot is simple because they have kedusha. Maser Rishon, you can't eat it. As kedusha is for the levim, truma, you get chiyuv mitah if you eat it because it has kedusha. And same is with maaser min hamaser, which is trumat maser, also goes to the kohanim as kedusha. Maaser sheni, you have to take it to Yerushalayim, also has kedusha. If you don't want to take it to Yerushalayim, you have to do a pidyon. You have to redeem it from its kedusha. The kedusha is now transferred to the money. You take the money and buy new items in Yerushalayim, also has kedusha. Maaser ani doesn't have kedusha. You just have to give it as tzedakah to aniyim. So what's going to be with produce that you did not take away? It's maaser ani. Now, what is maaser ani? Just to refresh our memories quickly, the produce that you would take truma, which is 2%. You would give to the Kohen, then you would have Maaser, 10% given to the Levi. The Levi would take his own produce and take 10% off and give it to Kohen. That's Trumat Maaser. Then you, the Israel, would take, after taking Truma Maaser Rishon, you would take a second Maaser on your produce, which would belong to you as Maaser Shani. You take it up to Yerushalayim, you eat it. But that's only in the first, second, fourth, and fifth years. But on in the Shalash Rishit, the Shishit, and the third and sixth year, that same second portion of 10% would be Maaser Ani, would support the Aniyim with it. Now, what exactly is going to be the halacha for Maaser Ani? If you ate a tevel that has all the other things you have taken off, you took maaser, you took teruma, but you didn't take maaser ani. It's the third year, it's the sixth year. So says the Gemara, Rav said you get lashes, you get malkut keman. Kaitana de Tanya, this is explicitly mentioned in a Braita. Amar, in the name of Rabbi Yossi, Amar Rabbi Yossi, Yachol lo yehe chayav ela ala tevel shelo ulam mimenu kol ikar. Is it possible that you would only get lashes if you eat a tevel? Tevel means a mix. It hasn't been fixed. When you haven't taken anything off of it. But how about if you took teruma gedola, but you haven't taken maaser from it, maaser rishon. Or you even took maaser rishon, but you didn't take maaser sheni out of it yet. Va'afilu maaser ani minayin, and even a produce that you took everything off, but you have not separated maaser ani from it. Says the Gemara, Talmud lomar, lo tuchal le'echol bish'arecha. The language of the pasuk says you cannot eat from it bish'arecha, right? In your gates. Ulehalanu omer, and we have a gezerah shava. Because later, when it talks about the aniyim, it says ve'achlu bish'arecha ve'saveu. They will eat this in your gate. b'sha'arecha v'saveu. This is talking about the maaser ani. כי תכלה לעשר את כל מעשר תבואתך בשנה השלישית, שנת המעשר, which is the year that you would give מעשר עני, ונתת ללוי, לגר, ליתום, לאלמנה, you give it to anyone that needs, ואכלו בשעריך ושבעו. They will eat it in your... So why does it say שעריך? It's coming to compare this with all the other matanot that you have to give. מה להלן מעשר עני, Afkan Maserani, just like in the second pasuk is talking about the portion that goes as a tzedakah to Maserani. In the first pasuk also, when he talks about the problem of eating it, B'sha'arecha is talking about Maser Ani as well. So hence, if you didn't take Maser Ani yet and you eat from that tevel, you get lashes. Fine. You can't eat it. Now, Amar Rabbi Yosef Ketanai. Rabbi Yosef says this whole business with Maaser Ani is Machloket Tanaim. How the halacha views Maaser Ani is Machloket Tanaim. How so? Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Ein tzarich likrot et Hashem al Maaser Ani shel demai. V'chachamim omrim, kore Yuzayin Amud Aleph, Kore et Hashem ve'eno sarich la'afrish. There's machloket Chachamim and Rabbi Eliezer. When you buy demai, what do you do with Maser Ani, with the portion of Anim? What does this mean? Let's give a little preface. Demai just means a produce that is questionable. It comes with a question mark. How do you have produce that comes with question mark? Well, very easy. If you buy from an ignorant person, it's very questionable if he has done his homework to give his terumah, Maser Rishon, right? Maser Ani, maybe he didn't, right? For him, every cent, every dollar counts. So maybe he's not as careful. Now, this actually has its own history. The Gemara says in Masechet Sotah, Daf Memchet, towards the very end of Masechet Sotah, that Rabbi Yochanan sent to agents to all over Eretz Yisrael to see if people are actually doing their duties of separating Trumot to Maserot. Want to know what's the mitziut, what's the fact on the ground. And he realized that what everybody gives is teruma. Teruma, first of all, it's not a big commitment. You could do 2%, 1%, you're good to go, right? Even if you do 1 grain midoraita, 1 grain you're yotze. The 3 levels that we say is all midrabanan. In other words, the Gemara says, if you are a generous person, you give, you do 1/40th. If you are regular, you'll do 1/50th, which is 2%. And if you're stingy, you do 1/60th. But even that is midrabanan, right? Midoraita, if you took 1 grain, harezu teruma, you put it away, now your whole thing is fine. So that everyone was doing. Because first of all, it's less of a commitment. Secondly, it says explicitly that you get chiyuv mita if you don't. So that everyone was doing. But short of that, many Amei Haaretz were not giving the other portions, right? Rov Amei Haaretz Masrin, the majority were, but not everybody. So when it's not everybody, what's going to be the status of me as a kola guy going and buying a produce in the market from a regular person, regular Amaritz, regular ignorant Jew? So I could assume that he for sure did teruma, but I can't assume anything beyond that. So do I have to do my own things? So he was metaken that you have to do your own things. But there is a caveat, an important caveat, because when I take ma'asir off, right, it's 10%. So I just bought 100 pounds of grain, so I took 10 pounds off, separated it. This is ma'asir rishon. Do I have to give it to Levi now? Well, he had to give it to Levi when he took ma'asir, but I don't have to give it to Levi. Why? because Levi has to prove that this is his. I have to separate it because I'm misupak if he did or not. So now I separated this. Now I have a question. Maybe this is the Levi's. Maybe it's not. And if the Levi can't prove that this is his, if he comes and proves to me that this guy that I bought from does not give maserot, then it's his. That's going to be going to the Levi. But if not, it's mamon hamutal besafek. I have the chazakah, I keep it, right? So you have to separate it, but you get to keep it yourself. And same would be with maser sheni. Same would be with maser sheni, that I separate it, and of course I'm going to eat it myself, but I'm going to eat it in Yerushalayim, right? So this became the new code of conduct when you shop from people who are considered ignorant. So how about maser ani? How about maser ani? Do I have to separate? Do I not have to separate it? So again, of course, this is not going to be any different than Maser Rishon. Because even if I separate the Maser Ani, well, the Ani has to prove to me that the guy didn't give Maser Ani. Then he could take the money. Otherwise, I get to use it myself. Right? Now, that is this Machloket Tanaim. In other words, even though the Rabbi Yochanan made a takana that you have to separate Maaser, you have to separate Maaser Rishon and Maaser Sheni from it. And also, by the way, you have to give Terumat Maaser also. In other words, you have the 100 pounds, right? Let's go with our example. You take 10 pounds off. Out of this 10 pounds, the 10% of it, which is 1 pound, has to go to Kohen. So you take 100 pounds. You take 10 pounds of Maaser Rishon, take 1 pound of it, you give it to the Kohen. That you have to give to Kohen. But the 9 pounds left, it's Maaser Rishon. But I don't know if he separated it or not, so I get to keep it. So says the Gemara, about Maaser Ani, there is a machloket Tanaim. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, En sarich likro et Hashem. You have to do nothing about Maaser Ani, nothing. You don't have to even say, you see these fruits that I just bought, that corner of it should be Maaser Ani, and then I end up eating everything at the end anyways. You don't even have to do that. You just simply do nothing about Maaser Ani, says Rabbi Eliezer. And Chachamim say, Chachamim omrim, Kore et Hashem ve'eno sarich la'afrish. You call it, you say this corner, this should be Maaser Ani, but you have to do anything further than that. You don't even have to physically separate them from the pile of fruits or produce that you have. Now, why is it, according to Chachamim, that you don't have to separate it? It's very simple. Because Maaser, you have to separate, because if you don't separate, you can't take Terumat Maaser from it, right? There are three things that are under question over here. When you buy from an Amaretz, you know he gave Terumah Gedolah. That we know, okay? So the questions are Maaser Rishon, Maaser Sheni, Maaser Ani. These are the three questions that are there, right? Maaser Sheni and Ani would be, the same thing depending on the year. So Maaser Rishon, you have to separate actually from the pile that you got, because the only way you could give a tenth of that to the Kohen is if you separate it first. So you actually have to physically separate it. Maaser Sheni also you have to actually physically separate, because you can't eat this here in Los Angeles. You have to take it to Yerushalayim to eat it. So of course you have to separate it. But Maaser Ani, what are you going to do? It doesn't have Kedusha. You're not going to end up giving it to Ani, and you're going to separate nothing from it. So therefore, Chachamim say, just call it that piece is going to be Maaser Ani, and then you get to keep it anyways. Because the Ani, unless the Ani could prove that the guy that you bought from did not take Maaser Ani, you get to keep it. Therefore, you call it the name of Maaser Ani, but you don't have. And Rabbi Eliezer says you don't even have to do that. You have to do nothing. Now, what's the core of their machloket? Why does Rabbi Eliezer say you have to do nothing, not even calling it a name? The Gemara wants to suggest that our sugya is the source of their machloket. My love behai kam miflegi. Why don't we say that their machloket is the more savar vadai tovlo, more savar vadai eno tovlo? Maybe their machloket is this very question, that Maaser Ani is different than all the other Maaserot and Materot Kiuna, that even by a Vadai, even if you know for sure that Maaser Ani has not been taken away from it, it's not considered quote unquote Tevel. It's not considered Tevel. You could eat it and then later on you will separate or you won't separate. And the other Mandamar, the Chachamim hold, no. If you didn't take, if you're the owner, you're the person that harvested this produce, and you haven't taken Maaser Sheni off, it is Mamash Tevel, like other Tevel. And therefore, it affects the Safek, what's going to be the halacha by your Safek. So Abaye says, no, that's not the question at all. Because if this would be the Machloket Rabbi Eliezer and Chachamim, then let them actually argue about Vadai Tevel. Their argument should not be, what do you do with Maaser Ani if you bought this from an ignorant Jew? They should argue in an actual case of Maaser Ani. If I harvested my produce and I have Maaser Ani that I haven't taken off yet, is this Tevel or is this not Tevel now, the produce that I have, before I take Maaser Ani off? Everybody agrees that if I haven't taken Maaser Rishon, that goes to Levi, or Terumah, that goes to the Kohen, if I haven't taken that, separate that from my produce, everybody agrees that this whole pile is Tevel. You eat it, you're in trouble. But if you're telling me that Maaser Ani is not simple, and that is Machloket Rabbi Eliezer and Chachamim, and Rabbi Eliezer holds that it's not Tevel, even if I have my own produce that I haven't taken Maaser Ani from it, let them argue on that. But they don't. It seems like there's no Machloket at all when it comes to my own produce, if I know that I have not separated Maaser Ani, that is considered Tevel. The only Machloket is when there is Safek, when I buy from Mr. Joe, the Amaris, that becomes the question. So says Abaye, genius. Listen to this. For sure, if you have a vadai, the case that for sure Maaser Ani has now been separated, that's for sure Tevel. So what's the machloket over here of Rabbi Eliezer and Chachamim? Says the Gemara, ve'hacha beha kamifligi. Here the machloket is more savar. One holds lo nechshedu amei haaretz al maaser ani shel demai. One of them holds that even Amaretz, it's not suspected to not have taken care of Maaser Ani, because it's very simple to take care of it. You know how they would take care of it? They would just separate Maaser Ani, and now it's no longer Tevel, so you don't get Chiyuv Mita for it, right? Because again, maybe I didn't mention before, even though that only by Truma, it says explicitly that you get Chiyuv Mita, but by Maaser it's the same halacha, you get Chiyuv Mita. So the question there was, if people who are ignorant know this or care about it enough or not. Over here is very simple. All you have to do not to get Chiyuv Mita is separate Maaser Ani. Now this is Mamon Aniyim, it's money that belongs to Aniyim, but you separated it, so you no longer have Chiyuv Mita because you separated from your thing. Now this is their money, and the Amares would end up using it himself because he says, oh, well, I'm borrowing from the Aniyim for now, right? So Gezel, it end up being Gezel Aniyim. That maybe they're not so careful because it doesn't get Chiyuv Mita. But they have nothing to lose. In other words, the Amaretz is, at the end of the day, he's looking at his bottom line. He doesn't want to lose money. Money for him is important. But what does it burn if I separate this as Maaser Ani and then I end up using it myself? So I don't lose any money. I just lose 5 minutes of my time. Right? So therefore, says Abaye, that's the core of Machloket. Rabbi Eliezer and Chachamim, they're arguing if Amei Haaretz were careful or were not careful in separation of Maaser Ani, even without giving it to the Aniyim. So Rabbi Eliezer holds that the Aniyim are the Amei Haaretz are very careful. They separate Maaser Ani, they call it Maaser Ani, and then they end up using it. But this way they avoid Chiyuv Mitah. So therefore, if you actually buy something from them, you don't have to separate Maaser Ani. That one thing you don't have to do. And Chachamim say no. Amei Haaretz, they just don't care about Maaser Ani. The only thing they care about is Teruma Gedolah. They do that. The rest of the things, they're too tambal, they're too lazy to do it, they're not going to do it, and therefore you're good to go. Right? You have to do your own Maaser Ani. So says the Gemara, because it is hard for them to separate and to measure and to do, they're not going to do it. Lo mafrish. Now, says the Gemara, this is a brand new sugya, very geshmak. Kama yochal min hatevel. How much do you have to eat to become chayav malkut? You remember this at the end of our Mishnah, we had this discussion of how much do you have? Do you have to eat kazait? Normally speaking, all of the shiurim of the Torah is bekazait, right? In order to get punishment, you have to have kazait. Now let's establish something before we go on. There is a machloket Rabbi Yochanan and Resh Lakish at the very end of Masechet Yuma about chatzi shiur, right? Shiurin chatzitzin umetzitzin. Mechitzin is halacha Moshe Misinai. There are certain things that are halacha Moshe Misinai. You eat a kazait, then you're chayav. How about if I ate half a kazait? Instead of having a whole kazait of pig, I had half a kazait of pig. What's my halacha? Exactly, right? The Torah says don't eat on Yom Kippur, right? How about if I ate just a little bit? Right? You have to eat a kotevet gasa. I ate a little bit on Yom Kippur. Am I in transgression of anything biblically, or is it only rabbinic? That is a worldwide machloket in all of the isurim. Every isur that you have. You're eating pig, even eating nevelot, uterefot, eating on Yom Kippur. And halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan holds chatzi shiur asur min Torah. Even if you eat a minute amount, you are in transgression of a deoraita. Unlike Resh Lakish, who says it's only a rabbinic isur, right? That is established. But that's for transgressing an isur. How about punishment? Do I get karet on Yom Kippur if I eat a little minute amount, or do I only get karet if I eat a kotevet gasa? Do I get karet when I eat half a kazait of chelev, of the prohibited fat, or do I only get karet if I have a full kazait, but I only get isur deoraita for less than that, right? For punishments, you have a shiur. Now, what happens with malkut? So if I eat chelev, I may not get karet if I eat small amount, right? But how about malkut? Maybe I should get lashes because at the end of the day, we passing like Rabbi Yochanan, that I am in transgression of isur from the Torah. So do I get lashes for that isur that I just transgressed? You see what the question is. So there is isur karet that you only get for the shiur, which is kazait, kotevet gasa, whatever it is. There is the actual transgression of isur deoraita, which is for kol shehu, anything. That's the Gemara at the end of Masechet Yuma. The question over here is, do I get malkut for that minute amount of eating, or do I not get malkut? This is going to be the question discussed over here. So at the end of our Mishnah, I'm just reading from our Mishnah, the last two lines, Kama yochal min tevel, how much of the tevel should I eat? V'yeheh chayav, and then I get malkut. This is back in Daf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph. I'm reading. Rabbi Shimon Omer Kol Shehu. Rabbi Shimon says anything. You eat the minutest amount, and you get malkut already. That's what Rabbi Shimon says. Chachamim disagree. Chachamim omrim kazayit. It has to be kazayit. Rabbi Shimon comes back with an argument. Says Amar la Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon says, wait a second. Iatem modim li. Don't you agree? Be'ochel nemala, that you eat one ant. We just spoke about this last year, right? You eat one ant and you are chayav number of malkuyot. Kol shehu shu chayav. Amru lo, Chachamim said, yes, that's correct. Even though that an ant is not kazayit, but you get malkut mipene shehu kibriyata, because this is a living organism. This is its own thing. Therefore, you get malkut. And he came back with his argument, af chita achat kibriyata. He said, one kernel of wheat, one grain of wheat also eats its own thing, its own briyata. So therefore you should get malkut. This was the argument that we had at the end of our Mishnah. Now we're going to be continuing this discussion in the Yud Zayin Amud Aleph by 2 dots. Kama yochal mina tevel, how much you should eat from tevel and get chiyuv of malkut. Amar Rabbi, Amar Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi said in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, Resh Lakish, machloket bechita. The only machloket is when you actually have one chita, one grain of wheat or barley, you eat that, you ate, like it's like eating a nemala. It's like eating an ant. You took a full, the way it was created by Hashem, and you ate it. That's when Rabbi Shimon says you get malkut. If this chita was isur, right? But if you ground it up and it's kemach, it is now flour, that is not kibriyata anymore. It's like an ant that you smush it, then you eat the ant, you don't get malkut because it's not kibriyata, it's not kazayit. Aval bekemach divrei hakol kazayit. According to everyone, has to be kazayit. And last narrow line, Rabbi Yirmiyah Omer, in the name of Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Yirmiyah says, no, it doesn't make a difference. According to Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, kemachloket bezu, kach machloket bezu. That according to Rabbi Shimon, even if you ground up the chita and you only have flour, amount of one chita worth of flour, you eat that, you still are chayav malkut. Right? So that's the machloket that's there. Now tomorrow, Bezrat Hashem, not tomorrow, Wednesday, Bezrat Hashem, we'll see how this develops. How in the world would Rabbi Shimon hold that one grain of chita that's ground up to flour, which is not kazait, if you eat it, you'll get malkut from the Torah, even though that it's not a shiur that the Torah has set up to be a kazait. And actually we'll see that the halacha is going to be like Rabbi Yirmiyah in Rabbi Shimon. Right? So surprisingly, that would be very interesting part, and it's a fascinating Gemara.